There's a particular kind of dread that only settles in when the world goes quiet, when the sun dips below the horizon and the familiar sounds of daytime give way to the whispers of the night. It's in those hours, alone in the dim glow of a screen or the silence of an empty house, that our minds can conjure the most unsettling possibilities. But what happens when those possibilities aren't just figments of imagination? Tonight, we delve into 3 true accounts of that chilling realization. I'd been working as a night watchman for a private research facility for about 7 months when the incidents began. The facility itself was a sprawling, somewhat antiquated complex nestled deep in the Redwood National Park, about an hour's drive from the nearest town. My duties were straightforward: patrol the perimeter every 2 hours, check the various labs and offices, and log everything. It was a solitary job, perfect for someone who appreciated quiet and routine, which I did. The pay was excellent, and the only downside was the profound isolation. My shifts ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. The facility was usually a ghost town after 7 p.m., with only the hum of the HVAC system and the distant chirping of crickets for company. My routine was meticulous. I'd arrive at 9:45 p.m., punch in, grab a coffee, and do my first round at 10 p.m. The old facility had a certain charm, or so I tried to convince myself. Dimly lit corridors, the occasional flicker of a faulty fluorescent tube, and the pervasive smell of ozone mixed with old paper and disinfectant. On good nights, I'd read a book or listen to podcasts between rounds. On bad nights, the isolation would start to press in, making every shadow seem a little longer, every distant creak a little more pronounced. It was a Tuesday night, about 2 weeks before daylight saving time would shift and bring earlier dawns. The autumn chill had truly set in, making the ancient facility feel even colder than usual. I was in the main security office, a small, windowless room filled with monitors displaying grainy black and white feeds from various corners of the property. It was 1:37 a.m. according to the digital clock on my desk. I was halfway through my 3rd cup of coffee, staring blankly at a monitor showing the deserted main entrance gate, when I saw it, a brief flicker, a shadow at the very edge of the frame, near the large oak tree that partially obscured the gate camera's view. It was gone almost as soon as it appeared, like a trick of the light or a bird flying too close to the lens. I leaned closer, my eyes scrutinizing the frozen image. Nothing. Just the gate, the oak tree, and the endless darkness of the surrounding forest. I shrugged it off, probably a branch swaying in the wind, catching the faint infrared light from the camera, or a raccoon scurrying past. This was, after all, a wilderness setting. Wildlife was common. I made a mental note to check the footage more thoroughly in the morning, just in case. The next 2 rounds were uneventful, and I attributed the flicker to fatigue. 2 nights later, the flicker returned. This time, I was patrolling the western perimeter, a stretch of fence that bordered a particularly dense section of forest. The path here was uneven, and the tall redwoods loomed overhead, blocking out most of the starlight. My powerful flashlight cut a stark beam through the oppressive darkness, illuminating dew-kissed ferns and the occasional scuttling critter. I was nearing the far corner, where the fence met a natural ravine, when I heard it, a faint snapping sound, like a twig breaking underfoot. I froze, clicking off my flashlight. The silence that followed was absolute, save for the rhythmic thumping of my own heart against my ribs. I strained my ears, trying to discern anything over the ringing in my eardrums. Nothing. The wind, which had been rustling the leaves earlier, had died down completely. I waited for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a minute or 2. Slowly, cautiously, I clicked my flashlight back on, sweeping the beam across the dense undergrowth. No sign of anything. No deer, no raccoon, nothing. I told myself it was just my imagination, heightened by the solitude and the eerie stillness of the forest at night. But a prickle of unease started to spread through me. That snap had been distinct, too heavy for a squirrel, too deliberate for the wind. The unsettling occurrences began to escalate. The following week, I was doing my 2 a.m. round inside the facility. I was checking the old archives building, a dusty, cavernous space rarely used these days. The fluorescent lights here were particularly old, prone to buzzing and flickering. As I made my way down a narrow aisle, stacked high with forgotten research papers and decaying files, I heard a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. It was indistinct, like someone mumbling just out of earshot, but it was there. My blood ran cold. I stopped dead in my tracks, my flashlight beam dancing nervously across the shelves. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding far too loud in the sudden silence. Only the low hum of the distant HVAC responded. I walked slowly, deliberately, down the rest of the aisle, checking behind every filing cabinet and stacked box. Nothing. The whisper didn't repeat. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. This wasn't a flicker, not a twig. This was an audible sound, a human sound, in a building that should have been completely empty. I started to question my sanity. Was the isolation finally getting to me? Was I simply imagining things, conjuring sounds out of the dead silence? I went back to the security office, heart pounding, and spent the rest of the night reviewing the archive camera footage. There was no one. The camera feed showed only empty aisles, silent and still, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't imagined it. The whisper had been too real, too close. The next incident shattered any lingering doubts about my sanity. It was another late night, around 3:30 a.m., and I was in the main administrative building. I was walking past the CEO's office, a large corner room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the parking lot. The blinds were always drawn tight, but tonight they were slightly ajar. Just a sliver, barely an inch, but enough for me to notice the difference. My internal alarm bells started screaming. I knew for a fact the CEO always drew them fully. With a growing sense of dread, I approached the window, peering through the gap. What I saw made my breath catch in my throat. Standing in the middle of the deserted parking lot, directly facing the office, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly thin, and dressed in what looked like dark, ill-fitting clothes. Its head was tilted slightly, and even from this distance, I could feel its gaze. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, perfectly still, staring up at the building. My hands began to tremble. This wasn't an animal. This wasn't a shadow. This was a person. A person who shouldn't have been there, at this hour, in this remote location. And they were looking directly at me, through the slight gap in the blinds, as if they knew I was there, watching them. A primal fear, cold and sharp, pierced through me. I instinctively recoiled, stepping back from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. I scrambled to the security office, fumbling with the keys, my mind racing. I immediately checked the external cameras. The one pointed at the parking lot was blank, displaying a SGML lost T message. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a coincidence. They had either disabled it or knew how to avoid its field of view. I grabbed my walkie-talkie, but my hands were shaking too much to speak. I was alone. Completely and utterly alone in this isolated facility, with someone or something outside. My next move was driven by pure, adrenaline-fueled instinct. I had to get out. I couldn't call for help. The nearest sheriff's station was too far away, and my cell phone reception was notoriously spotty in the area. I knew the back roads, the old logging trails that snaked through the redwoods. I rushed to the staff exit, a heavy steel door that led to a rarely used gravel path behind the facility. My fingers fumbled with the deadbolt, the click echoing unnaturally loud in the silent building. I pushed the door open, stepping out into the frigid night air. The darkness was overwhelming. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the towering redwoods created an impenetrable canopy. My breath plumed in the cold. I started to run, not bothering to look back, my feet crunching on the gravel. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sounded like footsteps behind me. I imagined that gaunt figure, silent and relentless, stalking through the shadows. I sprinted towards my car, which was parked about a quarter mile down a service road, out of sight from the main entrance. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I pushed myself harder. The thought of that unwavering stare, that dark, still figure, propelled me forward. I reached my old pickup truck, practically tearing the door open and throwing myself inside. My hands were shaking so violently, I could barely get the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, a comforting, if loud, sound in the suffocating silence. I slammed the truck into reverse, spun it around, and sped down the winding, unlit road, leaving the facility and whatever was there far behind. I never went back to that job. I called in sick the next day, and then officially resigned by phone, offering no explanation beyond personal reasons. The thought of stepping foot in that facility again, especially at night, filled me with an insurmountable dread. Even now, months later, when I'm alone at night, I find myself checking the locks twice, peering out the windows, convinced I might see a tall, dark figure standing perfectly still in the distance. The memory of that unwavering gaze, and the knowledge that something unsettling and unexplainable had been watching me, still haunts my quiet moments. The silence of the night no longer feels peaceful. It feels pregnant with unseen threats, and I'm always looking over my shoulder. I was driving home from my grandmother's house one Saturday night, a drive I'd made countless times over the years. It was a familiar route, mostly rural highways and back roads that cut through sleepy farming communities. I preferred it to the interstate, fewer cars, less stress. My grandmother lived about an hour and a half away, and I usually left around 10 p.m. to avoid heavy traffic, meaning I'd be home just before midnight. This particular night, however, I'd lingered longer than usual, helping her with a stubborn old VCR, so I didn't pull out of her driveway until closer to 11:30 p.m. The night was unusually clear and cold for late spring. A full moon hung high in the inky sky, casting long, stark shadows across the fields. My old sedan, a trusty but unglamorous Honda Civic, hummed along at a steady 60 miles an hour. The radio played a classic rock station softly, a comforting backdrop to the monotonous drone of the tires on the asphalt. I had the windows cracked just enough to let in the cool night air and the scent of damp earth and blooming wildflowers. I was tired, but content, looking forward to getting home, taking a hot shower, and falling into bed. The road was deserted as usual. Just me, my headlights cutting a path through the darkness, and the occasional deer frozen in the periphery before bounding away. It was about halfway through my journey, on a particularly long, straight stretch of highway with nothing but fields on either side, when I first noticed it. In my rearview mirror, far back, a single pair of headlights appeared. Normal enough, of course. I thought nothing of it, assuming it was another late night traveler making their way home. I kept my steady pace, maintaining the speed limit. A few minutes later, I checked my mirror again. The headlights were closer now, much closer than they should have been if they were maintaining a legal distance. They were bright, almost blindingly so, reflecting harshly off my mirror. I frowned. Was this person tailgating me? I eased off the gas slightly, hoping they'd pass. But they didn't. They just stayed there, a little too close, their high beams now clearly visible in my peripheral vision. The sudden presence of another vehicle, so close and persistent on an otherwise empty road, started to feel unnerving. My stomach clenched a little. I checked my speedometer. I was doing exactly 55 miles. There was no reason for them to be riding my bumper like this. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself it was probably just an impatient driver. Maybe they were running late, or just generally aggressive. But on this deserted stretch of road, at this hour, it felt off. The next 10 minutes were a slow build of mounting anxiety. The car behind me, a dark-colored pickup truck, I could now vaguely make out in my side mirror, never eased up. If anything, it seemed to get closer. Its high beams were a constant, searing presence, making it difficult to see anything beyond my own car. I tried speeding up slightly, hoping to create some distance. The truck matched my speed, sticking to my bumper like glue. I slowed down significantly, dropping to 45 ms. The truck slowed with me, maintaining the exact same distance. This wasn't normal driving behavior. This was deliberate. A cold knot formed in my chest. Then, the truck started to flash its lights. Not just a quick flick of the high beams, but a sustained, rhythmic flashing. On and off, on and off. There were no flashing blue or red lights, no siren. Just the aggressive, persistent flash of regular headlights. My heart started to pound. What did they want? Was it a warning? Were they trying to get me to pull over? The road was still utterly desolate, no houses, no turn-offs for miles. Pulling over out here alone, in the dead of night, felt like the absolute worst thing I could do. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white. A chill, unrelated to the cold night air, crawled up my spine. This was no longer just an impatient driver. This was something else. This felt predatory. I pressed down on the accelerator again, pushing my old Civic a little harder. I was now going about 70 mph, well over the speed limit for this road, and the truck was still right there, its lights filling my rearview mirror. The flashing continued, more insistent now, almost desperate. I peered into my side mirror, trying to get a better look at the driver, but the glare of their headlights made it impossible to see anything clearly beyond a vague, dark shape. Panic started to set in. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This person was actively trying to intimidate me, trying to get me to stop, and I had no idea why. My mind raced through every horror story I'd ever heard about late night road encounters. I remembered a small, dilapidated gas station about 15 minutes ahead, the only sign of civilization for miles. It was usually closed this late, but the parking lot was well lit, and there might be a security camera. That was my only option. I pushed the Civic to its limits, the engine groaning in protest. The truck stayed with me, relentless. Its headlights continued to flash, the rhythm now almost frantic. On off, a silent, terrifying demand. I could feel my palms sweating, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The feeling of being hunted, of being completely vulnerable, was overwhelming. My eyes darted between the road ahead and my rearview mirror, every muscle in my body tense. As I sped around a long, sweeping curve, the gas station sign finally appeared in the distance, a beacon of flickering neon in the oppressive darkness. My heart leaped. I slammed on my turn signal and swerved hard into the gas station parking lot, not even slowing down enough to take the turn smoothly. The tires squealed in protest. I parked right under the brightest light, next to the pump, and immediately fumbled for my cell phone, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I knew I needed to call 911, but I couldn't even unlock the screen. The truck, to my horror, followed me directly into the parking lot. It pulled up sharply, not behind me, but alongside my car about 2 car lengths away. Its headlights, finally off their high beam setting, illuminated the side of my car. I could see the silhouette of the driver now, a large, burly man, but his face was obscured by the shadows and the angle. He just sat there for a moment, engine idling, staring at me. My breath hitched. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated terror. He wasn't getting out. He was just watching. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered his driver's side window. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I braced myself for a yell, a threat, anything. But he didn't say a word. Instead, he simply pointed a single, gloved finger at the rear passenger side tire of my car. My eyes followed his gesture, darting to my mirror, then turning my head slightly. And that's when I saw it. My back tire, the passenger side one, was completely flat, shredded and flapping against the rim. It must have happened miles ago, slowly deflating, but I hadn't felt it, thanks to the rough rural roads and my loud engine. The man in the truck simply looked at me for another long moment, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He then slowly rolled up his window. The truck shifted into reverse, backed out of the parking lot, and drove off down the highway, disappearing into the darkness from which it had come. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the reality of the situation slowly sinking in. The aggressive tailgating, the flashing lights, the sustained pursuit, it had all been an attempt to warn me, to get me to pull over before something truly catastrophic happened on those dark, desolate roads. My fear had completely clouded my judgment. The man in the truck wasn't a stalker or an attacker. He was just a concerned stranger trying to help. The immediate danger of the flat tire passed, as I slowly and shakily managed to change it with my spare, thankful for the brightly lit gas station. But the lingering dread of that night hasn't. Every time I drive alone at night, especially on rural roads, the memory of those relentless headlights in my rearview mirror returns. I feel a pang of shame for my fear, and a strange, unsettling gratitude for the unknown man who went to such lengths to warn me. But the most haunting part is the realization of how easily our minds can twist genuine concern into terrifying menace, especially when we're alone in the dark, and how vulnerable we truly are to the unknown intentions of others, good or ill. The road, once a place of quiet contemplation, now feels like a place where shadows can hold both salvation and terror. And I'm always just a little bit more on edge, scanning my mirrors, looking for the next unexpected presence. My apartment was a small, one-bedroom unit on the third floor of an old brick building in the quieter part of the city. I'd lived there for 3 years and loved it. It was cozy, affordable, and just a short walk from my job at the local library. The building itself was a bit run down, with creaky floorboards and temperamental plumbing, but it had character. Most of the other residents were older couples or quiet singles, so noise was rarely an issue. My routine was pretty consistent: work, dinner, a few hours of reading or streaming, and then bed around 11 p.m. It was a simple, peaceful existence, or so I thought. It was a Tuesday night, late autumn. The wind was howling outside, rattling the old window panes. I was curled up on my sofa, reading a novel, a half-empty mug of herbal tea on the coffee table. My cat, a sleek black tabby named Luna, was asleep on my lap, purring softly. The time was 10:47 p.m., according to the digital clock on my cable box. The only light in the room came from my reading lamp and the glow of the TV screen, which was displaying a paused nature documentary. It was a perfectly ordinary, quiet night. The kind of night where you feel utterly safe and secure in your own space, insulated from the outside world. That's when I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound. It seemed to come from the hallway, just outside my apartment door. I paused, holding my breath, straining to hear it again. Luna stirred on my lap, her ears swiveling. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was rhythmic, persistent, like fingernails lightly dragging across wood. I frowned. My immediate thought was that it was one of the neighbor's cats, or perhaps a tree branch scraping against the building's exterior, though that seemed unlikely given the direction of the sound. I waited. The scratching continued for a few more seconds, then stopped. I dismissed it as nothing. The building was old. It made all sorts of strange noises. I went back to my book, Luna settling back down. About 20 minutes later, the scratching resumed. This time, it was louder, more distinct, and it was definitely coming from my front door. It sounded less like an animal and more like a fingernail, long and sharp, tracing patterns on the painted wood. My heart started to beat a little faster. Luna's ears were perked, her tail twitching, her gaze fixed on the door. It wasn't a cat. No cat would be doing that for so long, so methodically. I slowly got up, my book forgotten, and crept towards the door. My hand hovered over the peephole, but I hesitated. What if I saw something? What if they saw me looking? The scratching continued, now more like a gentle, rhythmic tapping, almost like someone was trying to feel the wood of the door, exploring its surface. Then the tapping stopped. A moment of silence, and then, slowly, agonizingly, the doorknob began to turn. The faint click of the lock mechanism engaged, and the handle rotated silently, fully downwards. I stared, wide-eyed, frozen in place. My apartment door, which I had locked securely hours ago, was now unlocked, its handle pulled down, ready to be opened. A wave of icy terror washed over me. I gasped, stumbling backward, hitting the wall. The sound was loud in the silence. The doorknob, which had been fully turned, slowly began to rotate back upwards, until it was in its original horizontal position. I heard a faint, barely audible click as the lock re-engaged itself, and then nothing. Absolute silence. The scratching, the turning, the clicking all gone. My door was locked again, exactly as I had left it, but I knew what I had seen. I knew that handle had turned. My mind raced, trying to find a rational explanation. Had I forgotten to lock it? No, impossible. I always locked it. Had it been a building maintenance issue, a fault in the lock? But the deliberate turning, the slow and steady movement, that wasn't a mechanical failure. That was intentional. My blood ran cold. Someone had been at my door. Someone had tried to get in. And then, for some reason, they had re-locked it. The sheer audacity, the eerie confidence, sent shivers down my spine. I backed away slowly, my eyes never leaving the door, and retreated to my bedroom. I didn't sleep a wink that night, sitting in the dark, clutching my phone, listening to every creak and groan of the old building, convinced I would hear that scratching again. The next day, I had a new, heavy-duty deadbolt installed. I told the locksmith I was just being extra cautious. I didn't mention the doorknob. For a few weeks, nothing happened. I started to relax, telling myself it had been a fluke, a product of my overactive imagination fueled by a scary story I'd read or too much caffeine. But the sense of unease never fully left me. I was always hyper, aware of sounds from the hallway, always checking my locks twice, sometimes 3 times. Luna, too, seemed more on edge, often staring intently at the door for no apparent reason, her tail bristling. Then, about a month later, it happened again. It was a Saturday night around 1 a.m. I was fast asleep. I woke abruptly disoriented, unsure what had disturbed me. The apartment was completely dark, silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. And then I heard it, a soft rhythmic sound coming from the living room. Thump, thump, thump. It wasn't loud, but it was insistent. My blood ran cold. It sounded like someone was lightly tapping their bare heel on my hardwood floor, just beyond my bedroom door. My eyes darted to the bedroom door, which I always left slightly ajar. A sliver of darkness, a deeper black against the black of the room. The thumping continued, steady and unhurried. Thump, thump. It was too slow for a cat, too heavy. And Luna, usually sleeping at the foot of my bed, wasn't there. My heart was pounding, a deafening drum in my ears. Someone was in my apartment. I couldn't breathe. Every muscle in my body seized up. I reached slowly, cautiously, for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers fumbling in the dark. I managed to unlock it, the bright screen a sudden, jarring beacon in the darkness. My thumb hovered over the 911 button, but I hesitated. What if it was nothing? What if I was just dreaming? The thumping stopped. Absolute silence returned. I strained my ears, my entire body tense, listening for any sound, any whisper, any creak. Nothing. Just the refrigerator. Slowly, carefully, I pulled myself out of bed. My bare feet made no sound on the carpet. I crept towards the bedroom door, holding my breath, my phone clutched in my trembling hand. I reached the doorway, peering into the living room. It was bathed in the faint, ambient light from the streetlights outside, enough to see the familiar shapes of my furniture. The sofa, the coffee table, the bookshelf, all exactly where they should be. And Luna, she was curled up on the sofa, fast asleep, her black fur barely visible in the dim light. She must have jumped off the bed at some point and gone to sleep there. The thumping must have been her tail, hitting the floor in her sleep, a wave of relief, so potent it made my knees weak, washed over me. It was just my cat, just my imagination. My rational mind tried to reassert itself. I was overtired, stressed. The incident with the doorknob had made me paranoid. As I started to turn back towards my bedroom, my gaze fell on the floor, near the coffee table. And that's when I saw it. 2 distinct, almost perfectly circular indentations on the old hardwood floor, about the size of a human heel. They weren't scuff marks. They were actual depressions in the wood, as if someone had stood there, repeatedly, applying pressure. And they were not new. These were fresh. They were right where the thumping had been coming from. And Luna's tail, even if she was thumping it, would not leave indentations in hardwood. My blood ran cold for the second time that night, a far more profound chill than before. It wasn't my imagination. It wasn't Luna. Someone had been standing in my living room, in the dark, tapping their foot, and I had been asleep in the next room. I screamed, a raw, choked sound that tore from my throat. I ran to the front door, fumbling with the new deadbolt, my hands shaking so violently I could barely operate the lock. I threw open the door and fled into the hallway, not caring about my pajamas or the late hour. I ran down the stairs and out into the street, not stopping until I was several blocks away, under the bright, artificial glow of a gas station sign. I never went back to that apartment, not even to pack my things. I called the landlord the next morning, explained what happened, and broke my lease. I lost my deposit, but I didn't care. The thought of stepping foot in that apartment again, of being in a space where someone had so casually invaded my privacy, my safety, was unbearable. Even now, in my new apartment, in a different part of town, I can't shake the feeling of being watched when I'm alone. Every creak, every shadow, every unexpected sound sends a jolt of fear through me. The thumping on the floor, the turning doorknob, the slow, methodical scratching, they are etched into my memory. And sometimes, when the wind howls outside and the house settles into silence, I feel that profound sense of dread return, knowing that somewhere out there, a quiet, unseen presence might still be waiting, ready to shatter the illusion of safety when you're alone in the dark.